Welcome back to the farm, everyone. It's nice and quiet here today because it rained a hard half-inch this morning, came really fast, and then also rained almost an inch yesterday. So the ground is a little damp, among other things. Depending on how you look at it, there is good news that we are down to our last bin site of corn. Maybe 50 to 60,000 bushels, old crop still at a different location to haul. It's too wet to run there today. We knocked out another bin site last week, so we have been doing things. I just don't always have the video machine on. There's those birds again. Someone said they might be ravens. I'm pretty sure those are crows. There's a lot of them too. There's at least 5. Maybe I'll throw a Rubik's Cube over there, see if they can solve it. Last week we also knocked out another huge chunk of both corn and soybeans ahead of these forecasted rains, so we're sitting really good right now, almost down to the short rows. I believe I have maybe 900 acres combined left to spray of both corn and soybeans together. Unfortunately, 300 acres of that is 40 miles away, 35 miles away, so I doubt I can do that all in one day. Shouldn't be too much of a challenge as long as I don't break something. That's easier said than done. When you have 120 foot of boom to supervise, you do occasionally give love taps to objects like fence posts and power poles next to the field. Yeah, we'll cross that bridge when it comes. That last big day or two of spraying may not be anytime soon with the previous rains I mentioned, and tonight and tomorrow there's a chance of some more strong storms moving through the area. High heat, high humidity, definitely going to be some big rains and hopefully no storm damage, but that's the risk you take when you're farming. Work with Mother Nature, you never know what you're going to get. As is tradition, I will take advantage of the rain delay and ride around and yap with you guys a little bit. My wife says I'm a very talented yapper, and some of you would probably agree in the comments. It just feels like another strong storm is building. For those of you who've lived in the Midwest in the summer, it almost feels like you're in the tropics. At any given time during the day, you can just feel the storm energy from the humidity about to erupt. So I think that's what we're going to get this afternoon. That's not to be confused with the Taco Bell I had while spraying the other day for lunch. Definitely a separate issue, and that was not my choice of food. Dad always says that you can tell the quality of the corn crop you're going to harvest based on how the sweet corn looks. And our sweet corn right now looks and tastes phenomenal. To be fair, we did bring out the 7,000 gallon water tanker and irrigate this twice when it wasn't raining in June, so we kind of cheated a little bit. I don't know if that shifts the scales of the harvest projections or not. Also, I just want to point out how hilarious of a comment I saw in the last video. I don't remember the commenter's name. They said that the radios you put out there that are supposed to scare the raccoons away just provide nice background music while they dine on the sweet corn. I thought that was so funny. That's probably the case because the raccoons seem to do whatever the raccoons want to do half the time. They eat our beloved sweet corn and then run over to Jeff's at the main farm, climb up the new bin stairs and poop on it. We got a lot of sweet corn. It gets ready faster than we can give it away and eat it ourselves. Don't sell any. In seemingly normal fashion, or at least a return to the norm for us, we've got a lot of variability out in our farms, a common case of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Very rarely do we get to experience a completely farm-wide perfect situation. There's 2 main reasons for that. First off, in the month of July, we've had 9 inches of rain, and the farm I'm at right now is probably closer to 11 inches of rain. Most of that, other than the last 1.5 inches, came in a 7-day window. We do farm a variety of soil types. On some of these very low-lying, swampy, yet super fertile, productive farms, unless you have a fortune tied up in drainage infrastructure, which we don't, big rains in close proximity like that are just a death sentence to top-end yields, particularly in soybeans, or at least they show the damage much worse. You can see a low spot through here, a lot of yellowing, a lot of water moved through there, and the beans are hurting because of it. I will openly admit that we are not without sin ourselves in this whole ordeal. Late planting, delayed planting, maybe some questionable tillage when the ground was too wet, planted a little too wet. A lot of wetness involved this spring, and that does play a factor. Could be some added compaction on these darker soils that really like to have a lot of looseness, not hardness, because when you do get the big rains and the water all comes downhill, it needs to dry out. And if you pack it down, it's not going to dry out that well. It is hilarious to think about how much I commented on the dryness in March. Should we even be doing tillage? Because I don't want to work moisture out. It hadn't rained much all winter. Then Mother Nature switched gears from March to May, went from forward to reverse, and it rained and rained and rained, and we got pushed way back behind normal for a planting window on a lot of stuff. And of course, she switched gears on us again after that, and it didn't rain from mid-May to the beginning of July, which is never great when you work and plant wet and then don't get rain. And then fast forward to about a 7-day window in July, we got the hurricane rains, 4+ inches, and another 3+ inch rain on a lot of farms from another big storm that came through 7 days later. And you've just had a yo-yo back and forth zigzag of suboptimal growing conditions. To be clear, I'm not complaining about the weather. There's no reason to stress out about it. We have no control over what Mother Nature, God, provides to us. It doesn't rain, it does rain. We just have to deal the hand we're dealt with. Yeah, we could hedge our bet on either side of the equation by installing subsurface drainage infrastructure, tile, or putting in irrigation systems, which makes no sense here in central Illinois for those of you who are asking. The ground is priced with irrigation included from the sky. Usually you need to drain the farms, and maybe once every 15 years, 20 years, you need a desperate rain, and we seem to get them when we need them, unfortunately, or fortunately. Yeah, that's all irrelevant anyways, isn't it? We're not here to make money, we're just here to have fun. That's all that matters. Who am I kidding? It does stink when you get crop damage and grain prices are low. It's the nature of the beast. It's farming. If it was easy, everyone would do it. Or if it was cheap, everyone would do it, probably. It's not always that hard. That's plenty of unnecessary yapping that doesn't even pertain to crop conditions, which is why I brought you guys out here on this little tour. We're gonna take the drone up in what is arguably our worst looking area, the ugliest, so you can see what I'm talking about in terms of water damage. This drone is convenient, but it just doesn't boot up as fast as I'd like it to. I'd love to just flip the switch and then let her loose. Be free! Don't try that at home if you've never done that before. You might lose a finger. I'm ripping the Band-Aid off right out of the gate. This is our wettest farm by far. It has been referred to affectionately by some passerbyers as Lake Dole. We've spent a tremendous amount of money, roughly $100,000 over the last couple of years. We added a second 24-inch tile main. I'm sure some of you have seen that video 2 years ago. We had to replace the original 90-foot laterals because they were all full of dirt. They were the original plastic tile that didn't have the appropriate UV resin blocker. That's above my pay grade, but they were disintegrated in the ground, full of dirt. So we spent a lot of money. We have accomplished a lot out there, and you can definitely play a game right now of guess where the tile lines are out in the field. The heartbreaking part of looking at a field like this as you fly across it on this overcast day is that those dark green spots are probably going to be 90 to 100 bushel beans. Anything that is a pale green most likely has an upward limit of 70 bushels, maybe 75, and those really poor spots, I mean, those could be 0 bushel beans. They could literally completely die, especially if we get another big rain on them. A lot of water damage out here because it collects the rain runoff from a surrounding 600, 700, 800 acres. It's the low spot. It comes out here in ponds, and we just haven't spent enough money to drain this thick piatone soil, and it doesn't naturally drain very well. It's extremely swampy. The issue with that, of course, is that it's tiled on 90s right now. Probably needs to be down to as narrow as 20-foot centers, if not narrower. And that's just a fortune to spend to have that custom tiled. It's a lot of money, and it's kind of a tough pill to swallow. You can also see the tracks where I sprayed soybean fungicide the other day. I don't know if that was worth doing or not, because I don't know how much yield we have to protect out in this field. The compaction is also evident as you look at this. You can see where I drove across it with the soybean planter to leave the field on the bottom edge of the image. You can see where the planter moved. You can see the tillage tracks from the field cultivator. It was just too wet when we were out there. Tile would definitely have also helped with that because it removes some of that subsurface porous water, or just waiting for it to dry a little bit. However, patience is a virtue that my family was never bestowed. I'll take you across the road to another very wet field. That's where I'm parked right now flying the drone. Again, you can see the yellowing in the field. Water damage is extremely evident in soybeans. It's not quite as noticeable in corn. It doesn't mean you don't lose corn yield from water damage. It just doesn't stand out like a sore thumb. Versus soybeans, you can see that dark green color go away. And unfortunately, unless you can drain a farm perfectly or have optimal weather with no big damaging rains like we've had this month, you're not going to grow 100 bushel beans. It's impossible. You need good drainage to grow great beans, and we don't have that on a lot of farms. Here we are on the back side of that same farm. There's a front and the back. This is a long 80 here. You can see where the water stands. It's a beautiful farm, easy to farm, very productive soil. We've raised the best soybeans ever on our farm here in these fields, 137 acres, but we never got these huge rains. And again, we're not going to grow great beans unless we can fix these drainage issues. And with some of these soils, I don't think you're fixing them unless you go plow in a ton of tile. We just don't have enough. And some of these spots that are very yellow, I mean, they very well may actually die. It is funny to see these random tiles out in the field that you had no idea existed. They're probably old clays. They could have been in the ground for 100 years. They don't move a lot of water, just enough that you notice them when there's big rains and you're waiting on the farm to dry. You can see these little crisscross lines across there. They're doing something. For us, corn is a lot less stressful to grow. This is right next door to those ugly looking bean fields. And even if this was water damage, which I would imagine based on the farm being similar to those other two farms I showed you, there is water damage out here. You just can't tell because corn does not show it the same way that soybeans do. It doesn't break your heart until you run the combine through it. Soybeans will tell you up front that they're not going to be very good. When you add everything up, compaction early on, water damage, lost yields, and then of course you factor in the high input prices for this season, and of course the low grain prices, it's not looking super profitable on the soybean side. That's the nature of farming. It's a very questionable business model at times. This demonstration of showing you the yellow beans has nothing to do with pity or anything like that. It's just showing you can put a lot of effort into planting a crop, putting what you think is the best varieties out there, providing plenty of fertility, nutrients, fungicide, all of that. And if you get too much rain, you can't handle the water, there's nothing you can do about it other than install drain tile. I'm really big on trying to get as much tile as possible. The finance committee, though, who holds the biggest checkbook here, doesn't seem to be as gung-ho. I think year after year it shows itself, whether it be the ability to get in earlier in the spring and plant your crops or lose less yield when you get big rains, the fact that tile provides a pretty consistent income. On a field like this, yeah, to fix it you'd probably have to spend $1,500+ an acre. I would say the water damage out here is probably every bit of 15 to 20 bushels an acre when it all averages out. They could still make 60. They could have been 80, so that would add up pretty quickly year after year. Ironically, it would cost more to tile some of these farms today than they were bought for when they were added to the farm long before my time. Or some of them, you know, it might cost half of what they were bought for. They say whether you have it or not, you are paying for tile, either by actually paying for the tile or losing the yield. Don't get me wrong, they are greening up a lot other than the worst spots. It could still make 60. 60 just doesn't really excite you in today's environment. 70 seems to be the bare minimum for a decent field here in central Illinois, and 90 plus would be the gold standard. They look a lot better if you just don't look at them. Throughout this month of July, the heavier rains have been more to the east. Like the farm I just showed you is 6 miles east of our main farm. The discrepancy between that and home might be 1.5 or 2 inches total. In a 7-day window though, when you have big rains, a couple of inches does make a big difference. Another added benefit of our ground around home is that it has a lot better natural drainage. There's not a lot of super low spots like we have over there in the Etna area where I showed you just a second ago. Yes, there's water damage around home. It's just not quite as concentrated and not quite as bad. This is the bin site that we finished up last week. Had some beans there in that north bin. It's nice to get another one out of the way, especially when it gets kind of muddy if it rains a lot. I've got the drone up here around the main farm. It's a little bit overcast, so it's creating a little more contrast in the image. It looks like water damage, but it isn't. First thing I notice here is a tile hole in the bottom middle of your image. That field was planted later in May, and then as you cross this lane, you get into some of those March beans. This area, the end row of the south field and the end row of the north field out into it, is probably one of the wetter spots around our main farm. Despite the sun creating pockets that look different, there is definitely some yellowing out there in those March beans that has to be from all this water. Again, you get a lot of rain, you don't have a lot of tile, it's hard to produce tremendous soybeans. You can even see a few spots on the end where they're almost wilting a little bit. That's unfortunate. I prefer my soybeans to not wilt. That's ideal when they don't do that. My drone started screaming at me because it was running out of battery and I didn't bring a spare. The lesson of the story so far is that water is your friend when you need it and it's your enemy when you don't. And very rarely are you in that perfect position where you have just what you want. I have one other thing I definitely want to yap about before I end the video, and that is the fiber internet installation that I mentioned previously in the last video. And I was surprised the amount of flack I got in the comments for not being a right-of-way expert, which I probably quite literally said I don't know about in the video. The confusion that I addressed was where the internet company got the easements to run the internet in the right-of-way here. Everyone said they can do what they want. That's not exactly true. A utility cannot just come in on a property and run whatever they want willy-nilly without the landowner's permission. The neighbor's cornfield there and our lot here, for example, as far as I'm aware, we own to the center of the road. The neighbor owns to the center of the road. They meet in the middle. However, the county/township has superseded our authority by having a road right-of-way here. So they own whatever footage it is from the road out both directions. I don't know if it's 40 foot. I couldn't quote you the exact number. Again, I am literally not an expert. I don't even know how to farm right half the time, let alone figure out what the counties and the utilities are up to. I believe that taxable acres are based on the center of the road. So you're probably paying taxes in Illinois to the center of the road unless I'm wrong. The question was, if we didn't give the utility permission and the neighbors didn't give the utility permission, how are they just running new utilities in the right-of-way without our permission? The township and the county can't just expressly grant permission to a utility. They only have the right-of-way for road maintenance and entrances and exits. Someone wiser and obviously much more in tune than I commented that Illinois has passed a law in the last couple of years, similar to other states, that for the expansion of rural broadband and fiber, they can run fiber internet in the county right-of-way without express easements from the landowners. The township cannot just decide to let someone run a utility in property they don't own. We own half the road, we just don't have any right of the road. The county does. That's the way it works. So it's not like it was out of line for me to question the authority. I just didn't understand how it was going in. Some of you acted like these utility companies just have unchecked authority to do whatever they want, and that is not true. Unless they are for the public good of everyone, like power lines, for instance, they can't just run wherever they want. It isn't completely unregulated, and landowners have a lot of say in what does or doesn't happen. A good example of that is through the main farm right here. There are 3 big pipelines. 2 of them are natural gas lines. One's like a 30-inch, one's at 24, and the other one is an oil line, petroleum line. Their easements, and they're probably very old easements, expressly state that we have the right of way for 1, 2, 3 pipelines. Individually or all in whole, I don't know how it's written. They're probably all separate easements. That doesn't mean that they can just come in tomorrow and run a 4th pipeline. They don't have the right to do that. In the same way, a water company cannot come along the road and run a new water line on our property, even if it's in the township's right of way. The township has no authority over who we can and can't grant easements to within some reason, again, back to the eminent domain public good type use. Obviously, the rural broadband programs that I guess Biden has put out, according to some of you, have circumvented all of this hassle, because a lot of landowners, and rightfully so, would oppose things being put on their property. It's just natural for people not to want to allow new utilities and things through their property because it's added headaches, and a lot of times some of these contractors are very careless. They'll go right through your tile lines. Will they fix them later? Yes, but the damage is done. So I get why people are apprehensive about these things, and I also understand the confusion created by my side of not understanding how they even got out there or the right to do that in the first place. So they legally can do it according to big government. And don't even bring me into the weeds on the funding of this program. It's not my fault. I had nothing to do with it. If you want to open up a really nasty can of worms about eminent domain, right-of-ways, public use, look up the Grain Belt Express transmission line. It's coming through the county south of us. It runs through southern Illinois, although I like to say I'm central Illinois, across into Indiana. It's a high voltage transmission line. I don't even know if the power is actually getting used in Illinois. It's just a transfer line. They filed all the paperwork with the Illinois Commerce Commission to be granted public use status or public good status to get eminent domain to run their high voltage transmission line wherever they want. And that's a very gray subject for a lot of landowners, and it starts to run the use of, do you accept it on their terms and get paid a premium, or do you battle it out in court and hope that they can't force their way onto your land? But if you lose, then you have to get paid whatever the court says it's worth, which might be worth less than if you just accepted it on their terms initially and probably got paid a lot more. So crazy complicated subject. It's been in and out of court multiple times. I'm not a big believer in eminent domain unless it is extremely appropriate, and a lot of times it isn't. Again, that's another subject that I'm nothing more than a yapper on, not an expert. There's a lot going on in the world, a lot of changes, some good, mostly seem to be bad. So we pretty much have no other option to be vocal and positive whenever we can. Hard to beat that good farm fresh sweet corn. We plant it at the same population that we plant our field corn because we use the exact emerge planter, just cap the ends. So this was planted at 36,000. Ears get a little small and we don't spray any insecticide, so sometimes the bugs get on the tip, so I crack the tips off. Makes it look nicer. They're a little smaller, but they're full of flavor. Who let the chickens out? Did you let the chickens out, Lenny? Yeah, you look guilty. Or was it you, Graham?
I'm here.
The storm of brewing to the west, I think.
Oh.
We better get started on this sweet corn.
What if he tries attacking the chickens?
That'd be an interesting development. If the cat attacked the chickens. I think the chickens could take the cat. He doesn't like a hard fight. He wants something simple like small birds. And he's also out there smelling his recent bathroom trip.
Oh.
We gotta get going. We gotta drop off some sweet corn to some people. Well, don't all be too excited at once. It's been a few hours. It's later this evening. No storms have really developed around here, although they are starting to pop up to the west and northwest. This is kind of the high time for chances today. I'm out in the yard doing a wellness check to see if the cat terminated any chickens and that they all made it back home. I think they did, so that's probably good. I wish my toddler was as timely with bedtime as these chickens are. That sun goes down and they find their roost. Status report, Clark. Thank you for not killing any chickens. Do you know there's rain coming? Oh, okay, know-it-all. Ideally, we'd like to let the chickens roam the yard every day, free range. We're just not sure about the dogs. The cat, I don't think, would really pick a fight with them. He likes easy prey, like small birds and small ground mammals. The dogs, I don't know about them. At least the female border collie definitely would never touch them. The male, I'm not sure about, and then the golden retriever, he's a wild card. He steals things out of the garden. Who knows what he would do to those poor chickens. The big 1-year-old and I have been here keeping an eye on the storms that have pretty much diminished and passively watching the Olympics, which is more like background noise than anything this year. Are you 1 year old? 1 year old? Graham, are you 1 year old? Big old man? Can you say hi? Oh, he said, I'm not watching these Olympics. This is garbage. Bye-bye. The remote is too important. Bye-bye. Yeah. Say bye. Kids these days, they don't make them like they used to. Anyways, like I said, storms kind of skirted by us, which is probably for the best. I'm going to take off. I'll catch you guys all in the next one. Thanks for tuning in. Peace!